Greetings, Cup supporters. We are delighted to have with us Melanie Kurdys. And I want to introduce you. American public education is in shambles. Most of our children and young adults cannot read well, do math, or have a coherent, logical discussion. The popularity of socialism in the 20-plus adult population was implanted by public K through 12 schools and universities. The anti-America agenda has been expanded by Common Core. Propaganda in schools sexualizing young children, pro-Muslim, anti-Judeo-Christian values, and racially divisive curriculum and policies. COVID, as we know, has provided an unprecedented opportunity to indoctrinate our children through technology. But opportunities exist in the chaos for the brave and prepared parent or grandparent. I watch my grandkids, and I'll tell you, you have to counter it. Melanie Kurdys is a member of the leadership team for the United States Parents Involved in Education. You need to go to their website. I call it U.S.P.I.E, U.S.P.I.E.org. And she's also president of the Michigan. Do you call it U.S.P.I.E or U.S.P.I.E?
Well, the Michigan Pi chapter is how we would say it.
Michigan Pi chapter. She has been an education advocate for parents, kids, and excellent teachers ever since starting as a volunteer as a school math tutor in 1993. Her experience in the public schools developed her understanding of the weak public policy that exists surrounding education across the country. Starting in 2000, Melanie became a grassroots education advocate, then was elected to Portage School Board in 2006. And in 2013, Melanie and Deb DeBacher started the initiative Stop Common Core in Michigan. Melanie continues her well-known advocacy for excellence in education in Michigan as well as around the country. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, well, we're delighted. It's a privilege. And what we're really going to specifically focus on today is the topic of critical race theory during our time together. But before we do, would you mind sharing a little bit about your organization, U.S. Parents Involved in Education, and its mission?
Sure. We are a national organization comprised of state chapters, and we are working to restore education that was as it was originally founded as our country was founded in the beginning, controlled by parents and local communities. And we really believe that the way to get our education system back and protect our children and make sure our children get an excellent education is to really empower parents. So we work hard to communicate, to make sure parents understand that they should have the power, and then how they can take it back. Try to help them understand the ways they can actually restore their control over what their children are learning.
That's outstanding. I was just meeting with a parent outside of our church on Friday, and she's saying, I feel like hopeless. Like, what do I do? So this is really going to be quite constructive. So critical race theory, applying Marxist concepts, folks, imposes the notion that white people are the oppressors, while Black people are the oppressed. And at the heart of these theories, it makes race the basis of class struggle, thereby dividing our entire country basically by skin color. And as one smart person said, they reject the idea that there is any objective moral order. Everything boils down to power, those who have it and those who don't. They also reject, or at least are suspicious, of science and logic, because these are the instruments of oppression. At least this is their opinion. Folks, this is diametrically opposed to our Catholic teachings, as we're going to find out from Melanie. We're called to live in harmony, not conflict. Melanie, would you please share with our supporters just a brief synopsis of critical race theory, what it is, and why it's so dangerous for our youth?
So it's important that people remember this actually uses the word theory in the title, critical race theory. It's developed by professors, people with doctorates. So it's not proven by fact, but boy, you wouldn't know that based on the way they present it. And one of the first visible exposures of critical race theory appeared last July at the Smithsonian, one of the Smithsonian museums. And they talked about the bad white culture and things like hard work, being on time. These are white characteristics that other people shouldn't be held to. Getting correct answers in math or science, planning for the future, it's all whiteness. But I think one of the most important ones for Catholics to understand is it undermines the nuclear family. It truly does not respect the nuclear family. And I think anybody who knows, especially Christian Black families, this is not a belief of Black Americans either. So it is a Marxist group, a small group of people who are trying to impose this idea, and they're very persuasive. I mean, sadly, their ideas are getting a lot of momentum. The woke culture is supporting them. One of the things you notice, though, is it's also critical race theory is getting a bad name. So, with Donald Trump saying he's eliminating it, Governor DeSantis in Florida says he's eliminating it. You will find many schools, the superintendents and the boards, insisting that they are not teaching critical race theory. But what parents really can look for are all of this terminology. For example, structural racism. Where when they use the term structural racism, that's a critical race theory where things are implicit. It's sort of like the point you made, all whites are racist. On top of that, think of how hard this is for children, especially elementary children. If you tell a child, because you are white, which you can't undo, you are racist, and your parents are racist, and your family is racist, and racism is bad, and you're a child, what do you do with that? Yeah. And then when they tell you the only thing you can do is become anti-racist, which doesn't mean being colorblind, it means looking at color and giving preference. So don't ever be first in your class. If you have a minority student in your class, let them be first. You have to step to the back. You have to lower your head. You have to get the wrong answers. You have to act like your family isn't important to you, or we won't accept you. This is not Catholic teaching. This is not good for children. It hurts them emotionally and for a very long time.
Well, I could see where it's so detrimental to our Catholic teaching, because frankly, what it instills is there's no personal accountability, because everything in critical race theory is attached to a group identity. So, it's attached to your race, or it's attached to a gender, or it's just attached to a group. And this, to me, counters every belief of free will that God gave us, that someone can break free of any bias that supposedly you have independent of that group. But they're telling you there's no way you can ever break free from it. Because frankly, if you're white, you're biased. And how do you break free from that? There's no way to. And then these children, so it goes directly against our Catholic doctrines. And to me, that's why I think I'd love to get your opinion on whether you think it comes from Black Lives Matter, because it really does seem to encourage our present society being overturned, like a revolution. And from every aspect, from our schools, from our government, from our universities, from all businesses, they're teaching this in businesses too. So it's so detrimental. But when you change children, I'm trying to remember what dictator it was that said, if I have the children for 4 years, I have them for life.
I think that was a Lenin quote.
It was Lenin, and I'm just sitting there saying to myself, if they get them by kindergarten, first, second, third grade, forget it, game over,
Right. So one of the quotes that comes out of critical race theory is that racism is our country's original sin.
Yeah.
And in Catholic teaching, right, the original sin has nothing to do with racism.
Right.
And so that itself is confusing to children. But then, they'll say, when you wanted to ask about the Black Lives Matter. So, if your school has this critical race theory there, if you say all lives matter, you are called racist. And so you start, that really is a trigger, like, well, what lives don't matter? And the thing about Black Lives Matter, that besides it being founded by Marxist people, they're not an advocacy for anti-abortion, for life of the born. If Black Lives Matter, wouldn't that be one of their #1 agenda items? So, as a thinking adult, when you're involved in an organization and this teaching of this material, those are the kind of things that trigger in your mind. They're not looking for what they say they're looking for.
No.
Now, I don't know how many of your audience followed the story of Rwanda. Rwanda happened, I think it was in the 90s. But it's not that long ago. And one of the things they started doing was dividing the country into separate races, tribes is how they did it. But the Tutsis and the Hutus. And at the time, the people did not self-segregate to that. And it was not obvious who was which. So they made this ruling that if you were tall with a flat nose, you were a Tutsi. And if you were shorter with a different nose, you were a Hutu. And they started in school. And they would classify children and make them wear a name tag that showed what they were and line up and all that stuff. And if you read about it, it's amazing how quickly what happened, the actual warfare where citizen against citizen with machetes and shovels and hunting down your neighbor to kill them because they were the wrong race, the wrong group. And it's happened multiple times in history. That one is so recent. I encourage people to read it. There's a great book called Left to Tell that's told by a woman who is actually a survivor. A few years ago, many of the Catholic churches invited her to speak. It's kind of a funny story because she actually was hidden in a inside room and had to be silent for months.
Yes.
And hear her speak. It's hard to imagine she could have been silent all that time. But
oh my gosh.
Really, really, really good. And it is so relevant to where we are, because if you look at the process of dividing a citizenry, that is what is happening, and trying to really create hatred between our people. U.S.P.I.E has an advisory.
Immaculate. And I'm trying to remember Ilabagiza, Immaculate Ilabagiza. That was her name. And she was amazing. She actually came to our church to speak.
She did,
yeah. At Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So that's a book.
I remind people to go back and reread that, because when you read it, looking at what's happening in the United States now, it is so chilling, so chilling.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that recommendation.
One of our U.S.P.I.E advisory board members is Dr. Gary Thompson. He is a Black professor. He is very much concerned about the critical race theory, and he did a great interview recently. I think we might have it on our USPIE.org website. But one of the things he recommended for people to take action is that racism is really based on fear of the unknown. And that one of the things that all of Americans can do to fight this is to seek out people who are different and try to get to know each other on a personal basis, to not let this create a mindset of fear and anger within us, especially as Christians, as Catholic Christians, to do an outreach as best we can to try to open the conversation and get away from this hatred and get back to what, the love of life, the love of family, the caring for your community, no matter what color, is really an opportunity for us.
Yeah, because this critical race theory is dividing people. And I think that's an excellent example that Dr. Thompson's, recommending for us, because that brings unity. So folks, that's your first recommendation. Encourage connection with somebody that is not of your color, okay? And get to know them on a real personal level. Have a real discussion with them. I love that, Melanie. Thank you. It is alarming to hear that children as young as kindergarten to fifth grade might be programmed to believe this. California and Illinois seem to be at the forefront of immersing the children into this critical race theory doctrine into the education system. Could you share with us, if you know, maybe you don't know, what states are furthest along in pushing this? And has it come to Indiana, if you're aware?
Well, you know, it has come to Indiana if you're hiring the equity directors in your schools. And that's really a clear sign that it has. It's pretty much in all the states. And as a matter of fact, I mean, a few states are starting to push back. Governor DeSantis of Florida is one who is tying it to the budget to really try to make a difference. The problem is the installed base of teachers in public schools these days are mostly younger, because a lot of the older teachers retired or left the business because it was moving away from what were good education practices because of Common Core. And so you have young people who fall in line with this thinking, and it's very hard to get them to actually teach well true American civics, true American history, the values that we long for. Sadly, I think some Catholic schools, they picked up Common Core thinking that they were going along with, you know, maybe good education practices, even though we tried to persuade many Catholic schools not to do that because they're just not good reading and writing and math standards and practices. But integrated into these things were reading materials that were already anti-Catholic, and it was harder and harder to keep that material out of the schools. And so any Catholic schools that are taking federal money, they are at risk of being forced to teach this critical race theory and integrate these practices into their school. And, you know, some people are challenging the Blaine Amendment, which is the amendment that kept public funds from going to religious schools. And even Republicans are fighting that. But people have to understand that eliminating the Blaine Amendment, increasing money follow the child for choice options, where the federal money is going into your schools, will expedite these bad practices being required in your school district. But I also worry, I know you talked recently about the bill that they're talking about, I think is it HR 5, the civil rights. I worry that,
the Equality Act, folks. I call it the Inequality Act. It is basically stripping us of every right we have. It is, talk about pro-Marxism. Go ahead, sorry.
But I worry that even schools that don't take federal funds, because that civil rights law, they will have the civil rights kinds of things like critical race theory imposed in the school. So it is good not to take any federal money. It's really good not to use Common Core or any of the Common Core related materials. But if we can't keep this Inequality Act from passing, we are going to have an uphill battle. So, you know, I work with schools, districts, with parents in school districts. We do across the country to coach them on how to fight back within their school district, you know, what the processes are and so forth. But quite honestly, I agree with Sam Sorbo. It's very hard. She's a homeschool expert, and a lot of people know her. She's a friend of U.S.P.I.E. That you can't unteach what your children what's being imposed on them every day, all day, and the peer pressure that comes with it. And so I really recommend parents pull their kids out, either homeschool or find an excellent classical Catholic school to work with, because there is no other place you can be assured that your children aren't getting this indoctrination.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Folks, my grandson came home a week ago crying. And it wasn't indoctrinated in the schools, but it's these young teachers. And this young teacher was pushing her views and telling the kids that especially white boys, are incredibly racist and they're privileged and they have basically atoning to do. And he's a very sensitive kid, came home crying. Third grade. This is insane, folks. And if you don't think that they're indoctrinating your children, you'll be lucky to even hear if your kids are telling you what's going on, because we got wind of a survey in Carmel Clay schools that's going around with kids. It may even be in the junior high, a racial bias survey and they didn't send it to the parents. So we're not sure if they were told not to send it to the, not to inform their parents about it, but we know they didn't send it to the parents. And so, I mean, this is just, it's when they get to the kids, our culture is done. All right. So I agree with you, Melanie. We need to act and act quickly. And if you cannot change it from within, then you have to pull your kids. Right. So
Right.
if so,
oh, well, and Vicki, I mean, you can pull your kids out and meantime use some energy to try to fix the school.
that's what I was going to ask you. What is
Yeah.
the process? Like when a California or an Illinois or any of these get this into the curriculum, what's the approval process? Can parents do anything about it?
Well, I was on a school board here in Michigan, and so I learned the proper protocol for board members. And community members can come to board members. Board members are not to have an opinion on curriculum materials. We had specific examples of that where our superintendent would say this is not a board level issue when a parent was reading from a pornographic book that their sixth grader had been assigned. And you have to, well, did you talk to the teacher? Did you talk to the principal? Well, yeah, the principal said it's okay. And the superintendent says, well, I trust my principals. If the principal says it's okay, it's okay. And so it's very hard to change. We had one school district in Michigan where through a recall effort, they turned over the entire board. So now you had a very student community friendly board. It took them 2 years to find a superintendent who would agree to take direction from the board. So that's interesting how that process. And now that superintendent is struggling because of union rules with how to make the teachers do what the board and the superintendent are telling them to do. And part of it is they don't know how, but part of it is they don't want to. Right. And if they don't want to, you're not going to be able to convince them to be patriotic if they don't want to be patriotic, and they'll be sarcastic and they'll be, undermining what you're doing. So it's a very hard process. I believe on a macro level that the public schools will change when we make a substantial exodus from public schools.
That's what I was going to say, folks. You basically influence by walking, moving with your feet. And when you take your kids by the hand in the middle of a class and walk them out and say, we're going to homeschooling and we're going to develop, communities of homeschooling and figure out how to teach truly moral standards, that I think is going to be the only way.
Yeah.
That's the only way, because they get money attached to those children. And when the money's gone, then they'll do something when their schools are empty, right? Oh my gosh. So what is U.S.P.I.E doing to stop the advance of this dangerous ideologue with our children? What are they trying to do?
One of our first mission is to try to communicate, to inform, to make sure people know. We're working on a movie called Truth and Lies in American Education. If you go to the U.S.P.I.E.org, you can see the trailer for the movie. Okay. And we're in a fundraising phase. So if people are like the trailer, you can, donate to the work, the development of the film. We'll finish that up. We think a feature film like that will help get the word out. So we do sessions like this, we write articles, and we also share legislation so that, like, we have, I think Oklahoma actually has legislation to eliminate critical race theory. And as I mentioned, Florida has some. And so we try to share that with our U.S.P.I.E presidents and encourage them to share that with their members in their state and their state legislators, build that. So we're working on that avenue and really getting the word out and helping people feel empowered, because, people will tell me, well, I don't have time to homeschool. You can develop partnerships with other parents, or you can actually even hire your own teacher, I don't have the money. And it's like, really, how much money are your children worth? Because this is forever. Your child is only 6 years old 1 year. And
Right.
what happens to them when they're 6 years old, 7 years old, it sticks with them forever. And it just like, you know, we start taking our children to church with us when they're infants, not because an infant gets anything out of it, technically speaking, maybe the Holy Spirit, the feeling and all that. But over time, they develop it as a habit, it's a home. I feel comfortable there. You don't know the day your child appreciates having been to church. You don't know what that day will be, but you do it every day, every week, so that you teach that child. It's the same thing for school, right? You know, when you teach your child to love themselves, to love each other, to put love above anything else you look at, how can you unteach them that there's a significant population in the United States that doesn't think that's true, that doesn't value you because your color? How silly is that?
Exactly. Well, and they don't value your parents. Let's
Right.
be real about this, about attacking the nuclear family, because they are going around parents, folks. They literally are going around parents. And with the Zoom connections now, you know, look, everything, there's a good side to technology, there's a bad side. This is the good side. But the bad side is, you know, the teachers can get in and they can indoctrinate children through that technology. And so, you know, what Melanie's saying is so important. You know, we have priorities. We all have priorities in life. And we have to ask ourselves, where do we want our children to be in the next 5 years? Do we want them spewing out this kind of hatred? It may even be self-hatred. And would God want this? Would God want this for his holy family? He wants mutual love for us. He doesn't want self-hatred. He does not want division. And this is what it's sowing. And it's perpetuating a Marxist philosophy. And the only thing that's stopping this is you folks, you. And the only way that can happen is if you are engaging your governor, because I think that may be the way. Because if the board can't do anything and the teachers aren't listening, then it's legislation, right? Then you have to get to the governor. And if you can't do that, then you exit. You get your children out and you homeschool. You know, do you believe that legislation might occur to force Catholic schools to adopt critical race theory? Because I'm really concerned. I think you inferred it with the Equality Act, that maybe the provisions of H.R. 5, because it strips out the religious freedom, right?
Right.
That we as Catholics will no longer have our protection of our beliefs, and that we will have to instill that into, you know, the minds of the youth with that piece of legislation if it gets passed. Do you think that that's
I do. I agree with you. And you know, you also had asked a really good question. I heard you talk about that bill, that legislation before, and you asked a good question. If it doesn't pass in total, could it start passing in parts? And could it start passing in parts in states?
right?
I mean, yes, all of those ways, you know, and of course we know the bureaucracy can just use their ruling arm that they like to just to start imposing these things, and so many people just roll over and say, well, I guess it's the rule now, we have to do it. I guess, you know, it's like sort of like some of the mask mandates, you know, a lot of them aren't actually laws that were ever passed by the legislature, but
No.
somebody said you had to do it, and you know, everybody's doing it. And so it is possible that it will be forced into everywhere. But I think we have to be willing to stand up. I think one of the things that's disappointed me the most through this whole COVID thing is I don't feel like our churches are being brave.
No.
That our clergy is being brave. There are a few exceptions, but in general, the momentum is, I keep thinking, okay, we're not having mass because we're afraid somebody might catch COVID and, you know, 2% of our population might die, which we don't want them to die. Right. But in communist China, pretty much everybody who gets caught in mass is going to die or have serious consequences.
Right.
And I'm thinking, really, this is the same time right now, and our willingness, we compare ourselves to our Chinese Catholic friends, what their risk is versus ours, and I'm disheartened that we don't have more brave leaders.
Yeah, they're sure brave at enforcing the masks, because you heard about that on the news last week, a woman who was arrested because she was in the back of the church and she didn't want to wear the mask. She wasn't even near anybody. And the pastor of that church called the police and they arrested her and took her away. A mother of four,
Wow.
in front of her children. And so they're brave when it comes to that kind of stuff. But look, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. And some, they say, well, we don't have the flexibility, Vicki, that you and your cup can do. But I don't know. I mean, I've seen some courageous priests out there. I see Father Heilman. I've seen Father Meeks. I've seen Father Altman, Father Graney. I've seen others. Okay. Bishop Athanasius, Bishop Schneider. They are courageous, but I can name them. I can literally name them. We need priests in every part of our country, you know, talking against these things, because they're going to destroy Catholicism. They're going to destroy our democracy, and they're going to destroy our freedom, folks. And I don't think people understand just how grave it is right now. But as I said to a friend outside of our church, last time I checked, Jesus wins in the end. And we have to remember that Jesus is the victor. He is the victor, and who's on our side? God is on our side. And all it takes is one or two of us to be the catalyst to create that ripple effect. And with God on our side, amazing things can happen. And so that's why Melanie and what she's doing with U.S.P.I.E is so important, because when parents get involved in education and they don't just leave it to the teachers and the superintendents to do this, great things can happen. I have several friends who homeschool right now, and frankly, there is a difference. I know their children, and you know, not, look, I understand not everybody can do it, but there has to be a way. You know, when you're motivated to do something, you do it. You do it.
Right.
So our high schools have recently hired diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, as you've mentioned, across the nation. And you know, it sounds like their roles are going to be to reinforce critical race theory. Do you agree with that?
I do, because it's really odd. You can ask, if you have one of these people, you can ask them, I mean, are you a supporter of all lives matter as a slogan? And if not, whose life doesn't matter? And, you know, I mean, just kind of probe it from an innocent point of view, just to say, well, how can it be right that we make our children at fault for something based on the color of their skin? That wasn't okay back, you know, in the 60s or in the 50s, right? When yes, Black people were discriminated against in a lot of areas, and we've come a long way on that. And that wasn't right then, and it isn't right now to just turn it around to be the people who are being discriminated against are the other people. So, you know, I mean, that doesn't bring the country together. That doesn't create unity. That doesn't create support within your student structure. So I think you can ask these people some direct questions just to discern what their motivation is. And it's not that hard, because, you know, the truth has to come out. They will say the things, those things. The other word I don't think we really explored that you watch for is equity. Equity rather than equality. So equity really means equal outcomes, which is, again, you know, like if you get an A on a test, that's not equal if somebody else got an F on a test. You know, that's you know, and I'm watching the NCAA basketball, and I keep thinking, I don't see equity on those courts most places. You know, for some reason that seems to be okay. But I don't know. I think it's just such a contradictory philosophy that we don't focus on equality of opportunity, but meritocracy. That is, individual effort gets you somewhere. That if you don't put that forward, you know, you won't get ahead.
Right. This whole concept that math and math homework, you know, is somehow racist is just mind-boggling to me. And, you know, our other granddaughter, you're just going to be blown away by this. This is how they've indoctrinated a sixth grader. Where I'm having this argument, really, it's an argument with her on the way home as I pick her up from middle school, and she says, we shouldn't have homework. And I said, why? And she goes, because poor Black people can't do it. And I said, no, okay, why is that? Why can't they do homework? And I mentioned Ben Carlson and his beautiful track record and what his mom did for him. And she said, well, some kids can't do that because, and all she did was keep repeating the same mantra. And she says, because they can't, and it's not fair, and we need to be equal.
Right.
There's the
Right.
buzzword. There's the buzzword, right? And so I think you're right about the equal outcomes, you know, and to give from this person, you have to take from another. And when you're taking from that other person, you're creating another imbalance. So it is creating inequity. And I don't think
Right.
people understand that. And so I love what you just said about opportunity, the equality of opportunity, because the reason people flock to this nation is because of opportunity, right? It's because they have the hope of jobs. It's because they have the hope that they can send their child through, if they become a citizen, through education and really make a great success of themselves. I just had Victoria Spartz on, and she is unbelievably successful. And you look at what she did. Did she experience something that said, okay, because of what I had in my background, this is no longer fair to me? No, she didn't do any of that. She looked at the opportunities that the United States afforded her, and she said, look at how blessed I am. And that's, we're losing that. We're losing that with this critical race theory. So,
well, I think the other thing that's really sad about critical race theory is it's teaching minority students that they can't.
right.
That they can't. And, you know, we've dumbed down so much of the education process. In the state of Michigan, we have school districts where, you know, like 0% of students read at grade level. It's a travesty. And, you know, during the 60s, I can't remember the professor's name. There was a Black math professor who was a civil rights activist, and he developed what's called the Algebra Project. And his argument was that algebra, especially math all the way through Algebra 2, was a civil right. And that it's statistically, you can show that people who know math through Algebra 2 have a much higher life success. And so he said he wanted to see minority students learn math as well, and to set the stage for success. So if you convince white children that Black children can't learn, they can't do homework, they can't do these hard math problems, they can't read Shakespeare, it's too hard for them. And so the only way to be fair is for you not to learn how to do it either.
Right.
And so you have successfully dumbed down your population, so there's no opportunity for anybody.
Yeah.
And that is, again, it's a civilization destructive point of view that you can't help but see that is intentional.
Yeah,
and that's why we really have to fight these things very hard.
Yeah, we do. And I honestly think that's racist. Telling somebody that they can't learn the math, that they can't do the homework, that to me is racist. That's saying somebody isn't capable of learning. Oh my gosh, it's so offensive. It's just, to me, very offensive when you tell somebody that they're not capable of doing something. Oh, well, what can parents do, or CUP supporters, to help with you and support you in this effort?
Well, first, go to U.S.P.I.E.org, join the movement. That's our join button. You'll get emails and, you know, notifications and things like that. The website itself has some great resources. We've written white papers on many issues, and that we try to keep them to one page. A really long one would be 2 pages. So they're ready resources that you can read for yourself. You can use when you talk to legislators or school board members or superintendents. They're handy references with nice arguments. We just wrote one not too long ago on critical race theory. It has the link to Dr. Thompson's interview. I'm pretty sure right in there. So there's that. And then also, if you can, if you would be inclined to give a donation to our Truth and Lies in American Education film, we can use that support and give it visibility. But the most important thing is not about us, it's about you and your community. And so talk to other parents. Talk to other parents about why they should care, community members, even people who don't have kids in the school, they're still all affected by this.
Absolutely.
And so don't be afraid to bring it up. And you can do it with the Socratic method of asking questions, so you don't look like, you don't just tip your hand right off, but it's sort of like, I don't understand this, what's going on, why are we teaching our kids these things? And, you might get in some interesting conversations, and you might change someone's mind, or you might open their eyes.
Beautiful. I loved what you just said. You may open their eyes. And I want to pray for you here, Melanie, and your whole leadership team, your board. And I want to pray for the parents of these children, that the veil be lifted on the eyes of all the teachers and the educators and the leaders of these school districts that are indoctrinating the children with these theories, these very dangerous theories. And I ask for you to call down upon heaven, Blessed Mother, and ask Jesus to send holy angels to watch over U.S.P.I.E, Melanie, and all of its board members and leadership team, to give them the strength and the courage and the conviction to continue to forge in this fight for, democracy, really, and for the protection of our children, so that they can grow up and live in a country that God blessed us with. I ask all of these things in your good and precious name, Jesus. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Melanie, I am so grateful for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicki.
We may have you back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay.